So anyway, let's jump in to why a16z invested in Burbn. So imagine it's 2010. You just raised a $300 million fund, a massive size for any venture capital firm, let alone a first-time fund. Also, all of your competitors quietly hope you crash and burn. So you better prove you're good at this. Luckily for a16z, their first fund became one of the best first funds in venture capital history. And the first investment to shine a light on this firm's potential was their seed round in the social network app Burbn. So I understand you might be thinking, what is Burbn? Why does he keep saying Burbn? The a16z never invested in Burbn. Well, Burbn was actually the original Instagram. For about 8 months, founders Kevin Systrom and Michael Krieger ran the social network Burbn before ultimately pivoting it to Instagram. And so Burbn was a location check-in app. Basically, when you went to a location like a restaurant or a park, you could post a picture of that place saying you were there. Sort of like a combination of an early Twitter and an early Facebook. And so again, if you want to get on the Substack at allthingsvc, you can see a picture of what Burbn looked like in 2010. It looks kind of like an old Instagram combined with an old Twitter, combined with an old Facebook. It's interesting to look at. I recommend you pull it up. But anyway, so when a16z invested in Kevin Systrom and Michael Krieger in 2010, they invested a $250,000 seed check into Burbn. So what did the a16z team see? Well, they saw a few things. So first, a16z recognized an intersection of technological change and pre-existing human behavior. Current a16z partner Andrew Chen has an interesting quote on this concept, as he says, quote, "New startups who can take advantage of a moment in time at the intersection of new technology, pre-existing human motivation, and can find a clever growth trick to get going, that's exciting. Technology changes, but people stay the same. If we can spot the new breakthrough products that can grow at the intersection of this technological change and people's behaviors, then we'll build the next generation of startups." End quote. So Marc Andreessen was an early board member at Facebook and a close confidant to Mark Zuckerberg. A lot of people say Marc Andreessen was Mark Zuckerberg's most trusted board member. He was actually the only one who really pushed back on Mark Zuckerberg selling Facebook to Yahoo for about $1 billion just a few years after they started. And with Mark Zuckerberg being, 24 at the time. So very close confidant of Mark Zuckerberg. So Andreessen saw the rapid development of Facebook, not only in terms of user growth, but also in terms of just incredible engagement by users on a daily level. So Mark understood human behavior in this way. He knew humans love social networks to share what they were up to and see what their friends or acquaintances were doing with their lives. And so Burbn's location-based social network combined the image sharing of Facebook and the in-the-moment updates of Twitter with the technological advancements in GPS technology into iPhones and the App Store to create a new social network that allowed people to share images of where they were at that moment in time. The Burbn founders did an exceptional job of studying human behavior, seeing what people loved about Facebook and loved about Twitter, and utilizing that new technology to create a unique social network experience. And so I'm actually surprised that Burbn didn't launch until about 18 months after Apple released the App Store and GPS capabilities for the iPhone. Because in 2024, with just how fast technology progresses and how many people are building companies, typically you have to jump on a technological change like this immediately. But I will say in 2008, before the movie The Social Network came out, which I really believe this to be true, there wasn't really an aura around starting a company like there is today. Like that movie really sparked and glorified and romanticized, starting a company as a young founder. And I actually have a chart in my Substack that, again, if you pull it up, shows just such the dramatic uptick in startups that were founded right after 2010 when The Social Network came out. It's actually crazy how much this movie influenced founders. And a lot of other founders and investors say this as like this was their motivation when they saw this movie. They were like, yep, I want to do that. So crazy. Great movie. Kind of inspired me too. But anyway, so again, this was 2008. So while it took Systrom, 18 months to start Burbn after these, quick technological change, today, post social network, if you're post the movie Social Network, if you're someone who wants to start a company by leveraging technological change, I suggest you jump on it immediately after it occurs, like we just saw in 2023 with seemingly thousands of, LLM based AI co-pilot companies starting after ChatGPT launched in late 2022. So just a little side note there about, I know Systrom and Krieger took 18 months, but if you want to start a company and you want to piggyback off a new technological change, you got to jump on that immediately after you find it. So this intersection of technological change and traditional human behavior is one piece of the puzzle as to why a16z invested in Burbn. But as we discussed before on All Things VC, early stage investing is very founder heavy because you have to trust that that founder will fight through the many challenges he or she will eventually face. And in the case of Burbn, be prepared to pivot into a new opportunity. And so while the app was performing, somewhat well and showing some decent promise, Systrom and Krieger, just 8 months after launching, were disciplined and insightful enough to recognize that one aspect of their platform, photo sharing, was much more interesting to users than the location-based check-in aspect. They felt that perhaps Burbn was trying to do too much and users wanted just a purely photo sharing platform. Pretty good insight. So that's why you can't just invest in the company. You never know what's going to change in a few years, or in the case of Burbn, in just 8 months. You have to evaluate the founder on their vision, execution capabilities, and just ability to sell. And so Mark Andreessen once described why the pitch to institutional investors, the actual founder's pitch in the meeting, is a great indicator of whether this founder can succeed in building and scaling his or her company. He once said, quote, "If you're not good enough at your job as a CEO to get up and present to an institutional investor for 60 minutes and sell them on your thing, it's a problem. We're easy. VC firms exist to give up money. We love when somebody walks in and has a compelling pitch and we can give them a check. That's a successful day for us. In contrast, every other pitch you're going to make is going to be someone who's going to be much worse than us. Customers' default position is no, I'm not going to give you any of my money. Engineers, you're going to try to recruit engineers and they've got 20 other job offers, right? So why is your pitch going to be so much better than the other 20 startups?" So again, I just view that as a big test, which is, can you successfully execute a formal pitch? So this quote is interesting because even though I've studied VC and startups for thousands of hours for several years, podcast is only less than 2 months old, but I've been studying this stuff for several years. And so I always thought that just having great growth and engagement metrics could land you a VC check, just having great numbers, and that the actual pitch wasn't as important. Great companies shouldn't have to sell themselves. The numbers can sell themselves. And so maybe that's the case for many venture capitalists. But seemingly for top tier firms like A16Z, you can't just have great metrics. You also have to have a great pitch. And Mark brings up a great point. It's a lot easier to raise money from VCs than to land top customers or land top engineers because VCs exist to give money to startups. That's their job. Whereas customers and employees are the opposite. They have options, they have budgets, they have other qualifications. And so the most sought after customers and candidates' default position to a pitch from a founder is no. So it's not enough to have good metrics. You also have to show your ability to sell the company's vision and sell the company's product. While I don't have information from A16Z partners about Kevin Systrom's pitch, I did find a quote from Chris Sacca, founder of Lowercase Capital and investor in Instagram's Series A round. Fantastic investor. When he's describing Kevin Systrom and his pitch to him in the Series A round, he said, quote, "If I see that in the pitch, the founder is trying to convince themselves, or if I can pick up on any hint that they don't believe in this story, then it's no dice. As I look at the most successful founders I've backed, the thing they all have in common is an inevitability of success. There are no conditional statements coming out of their mouth. There's no like, well, if it works, it would be rad." I love how it says rad. When you talk to Kevin Systrom of Instagram, for example, he's like, so when we get to 50 million users, we'll roll out this other stuff. And you're just like, wait, what? He's just peering into the future because he's so confident and can see the vision so well. And you're just like, I got to get along for the ride with this guy. So I suspect if Sacca saw this visionary aspect of Kevin Systrom, then the A16Z partners likely saw it too. So therefore, Systrom checked Andreessen's box of being able to sell the vision of the company and likely be able to sell it to future customers and employees as well, while also, as we talked about with Andrew Chen, taking advantage of the technological change at the moment to capitalize on traditional human behavior. They could trust that he knew what he was doing and he would be successful. And as many know, Burbn was successful. Well, maybe not Burbn, but Instagram was successful. And Burbn exploded in popularity after its pivot to Instagram. I mean, it was getting thousands of users a day right when it launched. And so Instagram quickly raised 2 more rounds of venture capital before selling to Facebook in 2012 for $1 billion, making it the greatest acquisition in the history of startups. Maybe Google's acquisition of DoubleClick, but Facebook's acquisition of Instagram, I don't know where Facebook would be without Instagram. It is certainly their cash cow. But anyway, back to A16Z. A16Z proved to their investors that they could find exceptional companies and founders at the early stage, with this quick return on investment, which yielded them a 312 multiple on their $250,000 investment back in 2010, and generated a 1,666% IRR. And unfortunately, because, since venture capital is such a power law industry, even with those multiples and those IRR numbers, there isn't, unfortunately. Instagram only returned about $78 million to A16Z as a result of this acquisition, which is far from a fund returner in their $300 million fund. And as we know, the goal of all investments venture capital firms make is to return the fund on that investment. So any investment A16Z makes, they have to believe that it'll return at least $300 million to the firm. And so while this investment, did not meet that criteria, it did prove that the partners of A16Z had a radar to go find and attract exceptional entrepreneurs, which would certainly set them up to deliver future success off of one of their first investments ever, which already returned them a 312x. And luckily for A16Z in 2010, shortly after their investment in Burbn, they found a true fund returner, and they found Okta.